G'day, Professor Joseph Drew here. In this video I will talk about evidence and amalgamation. Now, you would think that when you were embarking on a public policy as disruptive as amalgamation, a policy that can literally destroy lives, destroy careers, and cost billions of dollars, that you would put some effort into getting reliable and robust evidence. Sadly, that's often not the case. In this video, you'll find out what happens when we neglect to do the basics. So really quickly, what is evidence? It is the pursuit of truth. It is establishing beyond doubt that something exists or something has happened. And there's two ways to provide evidences, and there's several sources for evidence. And if we get it right, we get just outcomes, and good decision makers will be persuaded. But if we get it wrong, as you'll see, terrible things happen for people and communities. Now, there's two types of evidence. There's matters of opinion, what is helpful or unhelpful, what is just or unjust. And there's matters of fact, what exists and what has happened. Now, those two different types of evidence need to come from at least two different types of witnesses. And when we get it wrong, terrible consequences occur for local governments and communities. And if you hang on a second, I'll tell you how that happened. Now, according to Aristotle, the only reliable source for matters of opinion are people who are trusted and detached. And he also talks about the ancients. Now, the ancients are people who have written in times gone by. They're not alive now. They can't be corrupted or influenced by other people. Now, why does he insist that people providing evidence on matters of opinion must be trusted and detached? It's because you can't test anything. There are no facts to test. They're merely opinions. And opinions can be corrupted by money, by power, by the promises of power. Now, this is where things started going wrong with amalgamation, because the key players were not trusted and certainly not detached. Now, the other sort of evidence is facts. And the most reliable source of witnesses for facts are those who would share the punishment if their facts were subsequently falsified. Now, I will be arguing in a paper I'm doing very shortly with Professor Miyazaki, Professor Kim, and Professor Ferrero that the most reliable witness for facts are scholars, because we have to go through a strict and difficult publication process. Our work is interrogated before it's published, and our names are on that research. And if our facts are later falsified, our careers are over. We will share a great punishment. So we are a reliable source of witnesses for fact scholars. Now, for both opinions and facts, Aristotle says also, quite interestingly, that torture, evidence gained through torture, is infallible. Why? Because when you're being tortured, you can no longer be influenced by money or prestige or relationships or friendships. It's an involuntary thing. You give up information as a result of pain. So you're not being swayed, you're not being corrupted by others. And remember, that was a key consideration when we're talking about matters of opinion. Hang on, we'll find out what happened in New South Wales in a sec. So, evidence for amalgamation. It was all matters of opinion. There was no matters of fact in there at all. It's quite scary, but you read the reports yourself and there is no facts. There's assumptions which, without evidence, are merely guesses, nothing more. And the two major players in these matters of opinion were the Independent Local Government Review Panel and KPMG. Now, recall Aristotle. What did he say? For matters of opinion to be taken seriously in the judicial process, they need to come from detached persons or ancient persons. And why? Because opinion can't really be tested. It can be corrupted. It can be corrupted by money, by promises of power, by promises of future work, by relationships and friendships. So we need to test whether these two key parties who were giving evidence on matters of opinion were indeed detached. So the Independent Local Government Review Panel was headed by a professor, but it was a nominal professor, an adjunct professor. Now, a lot of people don't understand the difference. There's professors like me who have scholarly publications, over 80 publications, including books, papers, who also have a PhD, which is quite a rigorous, difficult process, who can prove their expertise. And there's other professors who universities have called professors. They don't have a PhD, they don't have a record of scholarly publication, but they have managed to convince the university that they have this great expertise and experience which should be treated and put on the same level as those scholarly professors. Now, what's interesting is the government, New South Wales government, chose this adjunct professor to do the work, but at the same time in this very state, we had Professor Brian Dollery, who is the most published local government scholar on the face of this planet today. Let that sink in for the moment. You had a choice between an adjunct professor with no proof of their scholarly abilities and a choice of the most published professor on the face of this planet. They chose the adjunct professor. Now, these people were remunerated quite generously. I think the ILGRP cost us $1.something million. And these people have since gone on to try to secure work in other states, telling the same story, still without any evidence, still simply matters of opinion. Let's have a look at the other set of witnesses that we had involved. KPMG, great at what they do. They have high trusted reputation in accounting, auditing, corporate takeovers, things like that. They also do an awful lot of consulting, and it's actually a big scandal in the UK that these big four accounting firms are doing so much consulting, and so much of government has been outsourced to these consulting firms. And there'll be a video on this shortly, because the situation in Australia is not much different. Now, the situation with KPMG is that such a large flow of their revenue now comes from consulting business from different governments, including the New South Wales state government. Are they detached? Could they tell the state government something different to what they wanted to hear and still expect to get consulting work and revenue in the future? It's really hard to argue that either of these parties were valid witnesses on matters of opinion. So what's really interesting about KPMG, of course, is that they're secret reports. No one's ever seen the full report. We do not know the names of the people who wrote the report. We do not know their qualifications. We do not know the reasons for their thinking and their assumptions, which I say were merely guesses, because we've never been provided with robust evidence to support that thinking and assumptions. Now, that sort of witness would not be allowed in a courtroom. That sort of evidence would not be accepted as evidence in a courtroom, because it's merely matters of opinion and the witness is not detached. The witness might be trusted, but they're certainly not detached. And you have to wonder, why do we have these secret reports? Why won't the New South Wales state government show us a report? I was in a courtroom where they were asked to produce these reports and we still didn't get to see these reports. Why are we still producing more secret reports? The Boundaries Commission recently produced another secret report, this time by Deloitte. We don't know who wrote it, what their qualifications are, and they refuse to send out the complete report. How can we have something that flies in the face of basic concepts of justice, as articulated by Aristotle, as used in our courtrooms day in, day out? How can we have this operating in a democracy? And you know what happens when you base decisions on matters of opinion by witnesses who are extremely doubtful, employing evidence which, let's face it, was probably tainted and compromised? You get injustice. And this is an example of the injustice in the photo. Cootamundra Gundagai. Gundagai fought against this amalgamation tooth and nail back in 2016. And as a result of the amalgamation, a direct result of the amalgamation, Their costs went up in the order of what they did throughout the state, and I've shown that in the best journals in the world. Costs went up by about 11% because of these botched amalgamations. And the community, the victim, the people who didn't want to be amalgamated, who fought against it, the community has been forced to pay the cost of these botched amalgamations, to pay to fix the mess based on bad evidence, based on matters of opinion by compromised witnesses. They have been forced to pay for it, and that is an injustice, and that's why I'm a strong advocate of the witnesses who provided the bad evidence, compensating these communities for that, of the parties who made the bad decisions on the basis of evidence that we know wouldn't be accepted in a courtroom, to compensate the victims for that. I do not think it's fair for the victims to pay for the mistakes of others. And I also believe that in a lot of cases where possible, de-amalgamation should occur, and that certainly should be the case for Gundagai. As I say, it's one of the gravest injustices I've ever seen. I still find it difficult to understand how this can happen in an open democracy, that the victim can be forced to pay for the mistakes of others. That is why, in the case of Cootamundra Gundagai, I'm an advocate for de-amalgamation. It's time to reverse the injustice. We wouldn't accept injustice in any other sphere of our civil life. I don't understand why we're accepting it in local government. I think the just thing to do is for the state government and the witnesses who provided the bad evidence to compensate the community for the damage that's been done to them, and allow them to de-amalgamate and gain control over their lives once again. Look, if you found this video helpful, please do me a few favors. Subscribe, hit the like button, and thank you very much for your time. Goodbye.